Sam Whitaker noticed her for the third time that week. The woman stood near the entrance of the Ridgewood Community Center, her dark hair pulled back, her posture too still to be casual. She was watching Emma. His 7-year-old daughter skipped ahead, oblivious, but Sam felt the weight of the stranger's gaze pressing against his chest. When their eyes met, the woman did not look away. Something in her expression suggested recognition, as if she already knew things about him he had never spoken aloud. Sam stepped forward, positioning himself between his daughter and the stranger. "Who sent you?" The woman went pale, frozen in a moment she had clearly been dreading. The first time Sam saw her, he dismissed it entirely. A woman in a gray wool coat standing near the chain-link fence surrounding Ridgewood Elementary School, checking her phone like any other parent waiting for afternoon dismissal. These kinds of things happened constantly in small towns where everyone recognized everyone else, and strangers were rare enough to be noteworthy but not necessarily alarming. The second time gave him genuine pause. She sat in a parked silver sedan across the street from Henderson's grocery, while Sam loaded bags into his truck and Emma waited in the shopping cart, her small legs swinging as she sang softly to herself. The woman watched them through the windshield, her face partially hidden by afternoon glare. Coincidence, Sam told himself firmly. It meant nothing at all, but the third time erased any remaining possibility of innocent accident. Emma had wandered too close to an unfamiliar woman near the community playground, who had been asking strange questions in a voice pitched deliberately low. "Where do you live, sweetheart? Is your daddy here alone today?" Before Sam could cross the grass to reach his daughter, the woman in the gray coat appeared from seemingly nowhere, stepping calmly but firmly between Emma and the stranger, with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly how to handle dangerous situations. The stranger's face tightened with fear, and she walked away quickly without looking back. When Sam finally reached Emma's side, breathless and furious, the woman in gray simply explained she had been walking by, and noticed the interaction seemed uncomfortable, so she had decided to intervene. She gave her name as Ava Cross, mentioned casually that she was a lawyer recently relocated to Ridgewood from a firm in Boston, and then she was gone before Sam could ask any questions. That evening, after dinner and bath time, Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, hugging her worn stuffed rabbit close to her chest, the way she always did when something was troubling her. "Daddy, that lady today looked at me funny." Sam knelt beside her bed, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Which lady, sweetheart? The one asking you questions?" Emma shook her head slowly. "No, not her. The other one. The one who helped me. She looked at me like she already knew me, like she knew me for a really long time." Sam did not know what to say. He tucked the covers around Emma's small body and kissed her forehead, but her words stayed with him for hours afterward, circling in his mind long after her breathing slowed into the rhythm of deep sleep. The next morning, before the sun had fully cleared the mountains east of town, Sam walked out to check his mailbox and found an unmarked white envelope sitting on top of his usual stack of bills and advertisements. There was no return address, no postmark, nothing to indicate where it had come from or who had delivered it during the night. Inside was a single sheet of plain white paper with 8 typed words that made Sam's hands grow cold. "A lawyer is watching you for a reason." He read those words 3 times, trying to make sense of them. That afternoon, purely by chance, he encountered Ava Cross at the Ridgewood post office. She was mailing a package at the counter, her movements efficient and distracted, clearly preoccupied with private thoughts. When she turned and noticed Sam standing near the entrance, the anonymous letter still visible in his hand, her entire face changed. The professional composure she wore, like armor, cracked visibly, like thin ice breaking under sudden weight. For just a moment, he saw genuine fear in her dark eyes, not the fear of someone caught in a minor lie, but the deep fear of a person watching their carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She said nothing. She simply walked past him and out the glass doors, her heels clicking rapidly on the tile floor. But Sam had seen enough. Whatever Ava Cross was hiding, it directly involved his daughter, and he was determined not to stop until he understood exactly why. 2 weeks later, Sam found himself sitting across a cluttered wooden desk from Ava Cross in her small rented office on Main Street. He had contacted her about an insurance dispute that had been dragging on unresolved for several months, paperwork related to storm damage claims that required a professional signature, and someone who genuinely understood the dense legal fine print that made his head ache. He could have chosen any of the 4 lawyers practicing in the county, but he deliberately selected Ava instead. He needed to observe her reactions up close, to study her carefully in a controlled environment, to understand what she was concealing behind that careful professional demeanor she maintained like a fortress wall, protecting something precious inside. Ava kept her eyes fixed firmly on the documents spread across her desk throughout the entire consultation. Every single time Sam raised his gaze to look directly at her face, she immediately looked down at the papers, her pen moving across the pages with practiced legal precision. But there was a visible tremor in her right hand that she could not quite control or hide. A slight but unmistakable shake that betrayed the calm she was working so hard to project to the outside world. Emma sat in a worn leather chair in the corner of the small office, drawing pictures with a box of crayons that Ava had offered from her desk drawer without even being asked. The child seemed unbothered by the tension filling the room, humming a cheerful melody from some cartoon she loved as she colored a picture of a house with a big yellow sun. But she was watching the adults too, in that quiet, observant way children have when they sense something important is being deliberately hidden from them. "Miss Ava," Emma said suddenly, her clear young voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence like a bell. "Why are you scared of my daddy?" The pen slipped from Ava's fingers and clattered loudly against the wooden surface of the desk. She fumbled awkwardly to retrieve it, her cheeks flushing with color that spread visibly down her neck and beneath the collar of her professional blouse. "I am not scared of anyone, sweetie, just very busy with all this paperwork today." Sam leaned back deliberately in his chair, studying her with obvious intensity that he made no effort whatsoever to disguise. "Have we met before, Miss Cross? Before you moved here to Ridgewood, I mean. Perhaps somewhere in Boston. Or maybe somewhere else entirely." Ava's lips parted slightly, and for a long suspended moment she seemed lost somewhere deep inside herself, caught between 2 conflicting versions of who she was supposed to be in this particular conversation. "Once," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed the word entirely. Then her eyes widened with sudden alarm, and she shook her head quickly, as if trying to physically dislodge the admission from the air between them. "No, I apologize. I misspoke just now. I do not believe we have ever actually met before today." Sam held her gaze without blinking, refusing to be the first one to look away in this silent contest of wills. "We definitely haven't met. I would remember you." The silence that followed stretched between them like a wire pulled dangerously tight, threatening to snap at any moment. Emma continued coloring peacefully in the corner, completely absorbed in her artwork and blissfully unaware of the tension saturating every inch of the small room. When the consultation finally ended and Sam rose to leave, he lingered purposefully near the door, pretending to check messages on his phone while watching Ava from the corner of his eye. He observed her move quickly to a heavy filing cabinet in the far corner of her office, pull open a drawer, and slide a manila folder inside with practiced quickness, but not before he caught a clear glimpse of what was printed on the paper tab in neat black letters. A case number he did not recognize from any of his own legal documents, and beneath that number, partially visible through the folder's edge, a photograph. A photograph of Emma at 3 years old, wearing the purple Easter dress that Sarah had bought for her at a small boutique during their anniversary trip to the city. Sam felt his blood go cold in his veins, ice spreading rapidly through his chest. That particular photograph had been taken during a family vacation to Lake Tahoe, 2 full years before Sarah died in the fire that destroyed their home and everything precious in it. He had never shared that specific image publicly with anyone, never posted it online or printed copies for extended family members. The only copy had been stored on a laptop hard drive that had been completely destroyed in the flames that took his wife's life. There was absolutely no possible explanation for how Ava Cross could have that specific picture in her possession. The parking lot behind Ava's office was nearly empty in the early evening light, just her silver sedan and Sam's older pickup truck sitting side by side on the cracked asphalt. He had been waiting there patiently for close to 25 minutes, watching the building's back door with growing impatience while the long shadows stretched across the pavement. When Ava finally emerged, her keys already in hand and her leather briefcase tucked firmly under her arm, Sam stepped out from the deep shadow of the large dumpster near the fence. She stopped immediately, her entire body going rigid with surprise and something that looked very much like genuine fear. The manila folder was still visible under her arm, the same folder he had watched her hide in the filing cabinet just hours before. "We need to talk," Sam said firmly. His voice was steady and carefully controlled, but his heart was pounding so hard against his ribs that he was certain she must be able to hear it in the quiet of the empty lot. Ava's grip tightened visibly on the folder, her knuckles going white with tension. "Not here, Sam. This parking lot is not the right place for this particular conversation." "Then where exactly should we have it?" "Because I clearly saw what is in that file of yours, Ava. I saw the photograph of my daughter, a picture that shouldn't exist anymore anywhere in the world. It was stored on a computer that was destroyed in the fire that killed my wife. So you are going to explain to me right now, tonight, how you obtained it, or I am driving directly to the police station with everything I know about you." Ava closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering every last piece of her remaining composure for what was about to happen. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, strained with emotion she could no longer fully contain. "The file is not originally mine, Sam. It was given to me several years ago by someone I cannot identify to you. Not yet. The timing simply is not right for that revelation. That answer is not good enough. Not even close to good enough for what you are hiding. I know it isn't. I understand completely why you are so angry right now, and you have every right to be." She opened her eyes, and for the first time since Sam had met her, he saw something beyond the professional mask and the careful fear she wore like protective armor. He saw bone-deep exhaustion that seemed to go all the way down to her soul. He saw guilt that had been carried for far too long without any relief or absolution. He saw a woman bearing a weight that was slowly and steadily crushing her from the inside out. Day after relentless day. Behind them, the back door of the building suddenly opened with a loud metallic creak that echoed across the empty lot. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her small purple backpack against her chest. Her face, uncertain and confused about what she had walked into. The babysitter must have dropped her off at the front entrance of the building, and she had wandered through the empty hallways searching for her father when he was not waiting in the usual spot by the car. She looked at Ava standing there in the parking lot with the folder under her arm, then up at Sam, her young eyes filled with confusion and the beginning of worry. "Do you know my mom?" The question came out of nowhere, hanging in the air between the three of them like smoke from an extinguished candle, impossible to wave away or simply ignore. Ava went completely still, as if someone had pressed a pause button on her entire existence. Her face drained of all color until she looked almost gray in the fading golden light. She stared at Emma as if the child had just spoken in a language Ava had spent years desperately trying to forget. Words that cut straight through every defense she had carefully built around herself. Sam pulled Emma close against his side, his arm wrapping protectively around her thin shoulders. "Answer her question, Ava. Right now." Ava's voice came out barely above a whisper, rough and strained with emotion she could no longer fully contain behind her crumbling walls. "I am not following you, Sam. I swear to you on everything I have ever held dear. I am not your enemy. I am trying my very best to keep you and Emma safe from people who genuinely wish you both serious harm." She walked past them toward her car without another word, her heels clicking against the cracked asphalt of the dark parking lot. Sam watched her silver sedan pull away into the gathering dusk. Emma pressed warm and small against his side, both of them standing there in the fading golden light, with far more questions than they had possessed that morning. The knocking came at exactly 11:43 at night, sharp and loud enough to jolt Sam from the uneasy, restless sleep he had finally managed to fall into after hours of staring at the ceiling and replaying every strange encounter with Ava Cross in his mind. It was not a polite knock or a gentle tap from a neighbor with a minor concern about something trivial. It was urgent and almost frantic, fists pounding hard and fast against the wooden front door, as if the person outside was desperate to get in or warn someone of approaching danger that could not wait until morning. Sam grabbed the aluminum baseball bat he kept leaning against the wall beside his bed and moved quickly down the dark hallway, his bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. Emma's bedroom door was closed tight, her small pink nightlight glowing softly beneath the frame, and he paused briefly to listen for any sound of distress from within before continuing toward the front of the house. The knocking stopped abruptly, leaving only thick silence and the distant sound of a car passing on the main road 2 blocks away. Sam reached the front door and pressed his eye carefully to the small peephole, his grip tight on the bat and his breathing deliberately slow and controlled. Nothing. Just the empty wooden porch and the dark lawn stretching out beyond into deep shadow, the single streetlight at the corner of the block casting long, pale shadows across the damp grass. He opened the door, slowly, cautiously, the bat raised and ready for whatever might be waiting on the other side. That is when he finally saw her standing there in the darkness. Ava Cross stood at the very edge of his gravel driveway, breathing hard and fast, her dark coat disheveled and half unbuttoned, her usually neat hair coming loose from its careful arrangement and falling wildly across her flushed face. She was looking intently down the street toward the distant intersection, her entire body tense with adrenaline, as if she had just been chasing someone through the darkness and lost them somewhere in the shadows between the sleeping houses. "What the hell are you doing here at this hour?" Sam demanded, stepping out onto the cold porch, the rough wood painful against his bare feet. "Someone was at your door just now," Ava said without turning to face him, still scanning the dark street with intense focus. "I saw them from my car parked down the block, a figure dressed in dark clothing, standing right on your front porch. They ran the moment they heard me getting out of my vehicle." Sam felt a chill run down the entire length of his spine that had nothing whatsoever to do with the cold night air. "Why were you parked down the street from my house in the middle of the night, Ava? What possible legitimate reason could you have for being here at this hour?" Before Ava could answer his question, Emma appeared in the doorway behind Sam, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly to her chest, her small face pale with fear in the dim light spilling from inside the house. She looked at Ava standing at the edge of the driveway, then up at her father, her eyes filling slowly with frightened tears that caught the light. "Daddy, she was at my school again today. I saw her watching me through the fence during afternoon recess. She was just standing there by herself, looking at me." Sam turned back to Ava, his grip tightening on the baseball bat until his knuckles went completely white with tension. "You need to start explaining things to me right now. No more evasions, no more half answers. The complete truth." Ava raised both her hands slowly in front of her body, palms facing outward, a gesture of complete surrender and openness. "There is someone else out there besides me, Sam. Someone who has been tracking your family's movements for years now. I have been trying desperately to identify who they are and who they work for, but they are extremely careful and highly skilled at remaining completely hidden. Tonight, whoever they sent got much too close to you and Emma. Too close for me to stay in the shadows watching any longer." She paused, her breath forming small white clouds in the frigid night air. "I am not your enemy, Sam. I have never been your enemy, but I am definitely not the only person who knows exactly where you and your daughter live and what your daily routines look like." Sam stared at her for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities and dark implications. The next morning, before Emma had even woken up for school, he drove to the county records office in the neighboring town and ran a detailed search on the license plate of a black SUV he had noticed following them on at least 3 separate occasions over the past 2 weeks. The registration traced back to a private investigation and security firm called Sentinel Associates that had been officially dissolved and removed from the state business registry 3 years earlier. According to the available public filings, the firm had apparently worked on exactly one documented case during its brief 18-month existence before closing its doors permanently. and that single case had been supervised by a young attorney fresh out of law school named Ava Cross. Sam found her outside her office the following afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to sink toward the western hills, and she was locking the front door for the evening. The main street of Ridgewood was quiet and nearly empty at that hour, most of the small shops and businesses already closed and dark, their owners gone home to families and dinners and evening routines. Sam stepped directly in front of her on the sidewalk, deliberately blocking her path to the parking lot behind the building. "Who sent you to this town?" His voice was low and tightly controlled, but there was absolutely no mistaking the deep anger burning just beneath the surface of his carefully chosen words. "Who told you to come to Ridgewood and watch my daughter?" "I want the truth this time, Ava. All of it." Ava met his eyes directly without flinching or trying to look away, but something fundamental in her expression began to shift and crack under the sustained pressure of his gaze. The professional mask she had worn so carefully since the very first day he encountered her near the elementary school started to slip away like melting ice, revealing something raw and deeply vulnerable underneath. "Sam, please, we cannot do this here on the street, where anyone walking by might see us and overhear our conversation. This is not the place." "Then where?" "Your office again? The parking lot? Because every single time I have tried to get real answers from you, you find some excuse to disappear before I can learn anything actually useful about what is going on. My wife is dead. My daughter is being followed by strangers I cannot identify. And you show up out of nowhere in our lives, watching us constantly, like you are waiting for something terrible to happen." He stepped closer to her, close enough now to see the rapid pulse jumping in the hollow of her throat. "So I am asking you one final time, and I expect a complete and honest answer. Who sent you here to Ridgewood?" Ava's careful composure finally broke apart completely, like a dam giving way under far too much sustained pressure. Her shoulders dropped with visible exhaustion. Her dark eyes glistened with the beginning of tears she was clearly fighting hard to hold back, but failing. "If I tell you the complete truth tonight, your entire understanding of the past is going to break wide open. Everything you thought you knew about what happened to your family will change completely and forever. I do not care anymore. I need to know the truth, whatever it is." "You really should care very much about this, Sam. This is not information you can simply unhear once it has been spoken aloud." She looked past him toward the street where Emma sat waiting patiently in the truck, watching them both through the dusty windshield with curious, worried eyes that tracked every gesture and expression. Ava's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "There are things about Sarah's death that do not add up correctly. Things that never made sense from the very beginning, if you looked closely enough at the evidence. Things I was specifically ordered to bury and forget about permanently. Things I have never been able to stop thinking about, no matter how hard I tried to move on with my life and career." Sam felt the solid ground shift and tilt beneath his feet, as if the earth itself was no longer stable. "What exactly are you talking about?" "What things?" Ava opened her mouth to continue, but Emma had already climbed down from the truck and was now running quickly toward them across the cracked sidewalk, her purple backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She threw her small arms around Sam's waist, hugging him tightly, then looked up at Ava with a child's pure, unfiltered honesty shining clearly in her young eyes. "Are you going to help us? Are you going to help my daddy figure out what happened to my mommy?" Ava stared down at the little girl, and something profound and irreversible shifted visibly across her tired face. It was the expression of someone who had spent years carefully building walls around themselves for protection, only to watch those walls crumble completely in a single, unexpected instant, brought down by a child's simple, innocent question. "I am trying to help," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion she could no longer hide. "I have been trying to help your family for a very long time now. Much longer than you know." His name was Arthur Brennan, and he had been Ava's mentor and supervisor at the prestigious Boston law firm where she had started her legal career immediately after graduating from law school near the top of her class. He was 73 years old now, with thick white hair that had once been dark and strong, weathered hands that trembled noticeably when he poured cream into his coffee or lifted his cup to drink. He had reluctantly agreed to meet Sam at a small roadside diner about 15 miles outside of Ridgewood, a place where neither of them would likely be recognized by anyone who might report the meeting to interested parties. Ava was without question one of the finest young lawyers I have ever had the privilege of training during my 40 years in legal practice. Arthur began, stirring his coffee slowly with a small tarnished spoon. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness and was tired of carrying that heavy knowledge alone. She had an exceptionally sharp legal mind and a strong ethical compass that guided every single decision she made. Perhaps too strong, as it turned out, for the kind of work our firm was actually doing behind closed doors for certain powerful clients. Sam leaned forward across the worn Formica table, his own coffee growing cold and untouched. "What kind of work exactly, Mr. Brennan? What was the firm involved in?" Arthur hesitated for a long moment, staring down at the dark surface of his coffee as if he might find the right words floating there somewhere. He stirred the cup again slowly, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic, clearly buying himself time to choose what he would reveal and what he would hold back. 6 years ago, Ava was assigned to assist with a case involving a wrongful death insurance claim that one of our major corporate clients wanted resolved quickly and quietly. A young woman named Sarah Whitaker had died in a house fire at her residence in a suburb outside Boston. The insurance company that held her substantial life policy wanted to close the file and pay out the claim as rapidly as possible, with minimal investigation or publicity. But Ava, being the thorough and conscientious attorney she was, started finding troubling inconsistencies in the official documentation that no one else had bothered to examine closely. Witness statements from neighbors that directly contradicted each other in significant ways. Physical evidence from the fire scene that appeared to have been altered or tampered with after collection. Fire investigation reports that did not match the actual photographs taken at the scene by first responders. Sam's hands clenched hard beneath the table, his knuckles going white with tension. "My wife. You are talking about my wife, Sarah." Arthur nodded slowly, his aged eyes filled with something that looked like genuine sorrow and perhaps personal regret. Ava came to believe, based on her careful analysis of the evidence, that the fire was not an accident at all. She believed that someone with significant resources and careful planning capability had specifically wanted your wife dead and had arranged for it to happen in a way that would appear completely accidental to casual investigators. But when Ava tried to investigate further and gather additional evidence to support her theory, she was shut down immediately. Hard and fast, with no room for negotiation or appeal. The senior partners at the firm called her into a closed-door meeting and told her in absolutely no uncertain terms to drop the entire matter permanently and never speak of it again to anyone. When she refused to let it go, when she insisted that justice required a full investigation, she was pushed out of the firm within a single week. Her promising legal career was effectively destroyed overnight. Sam swallowed hard against the painful tightness in his throat. And what happened to the case itself after she was gone? Arthur's expression grew even more grave, his lined face settling into deep shadows. Buried completely. All the files were sealed under attorney-client privilege and locked away where no one could ever access them. Ava was given a very clear and explicit warning by the firm's managing partner that if she ever spoke publicly about any aspect of the case again, her law license would be revoked permanently. He paused heavily, his tired eyes meeting Sam's across the worn table. But she never actually stopped investigating on her own time. She has been quietly watching over you and Emma ever since Sarah died in that fire. Not because anyone sent her or paid her to do it, because she could not live with the guilt of what she had been forced to participate in, however unwillingly. Arthur reached slowly into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, worn soft at the edges from years of careful handling. "Ava asked me to hold this for safekeeping and give it to you if anything significant ever happened. I believe that time has finally arrived." Sam took the heavy envelope with unsteady hands. Inside was a copy of an official file stamped clearly across the front with bold red letters, "Confidential Child Protection Target." and printed neatly beneath those ominous words, in standard government typeface, was his daughter Emma's full legal name. The courtroom was small and windowless, a utilitarian space typically reserved for preliminary hearings and minor civil disputes that did not warrant the formality of a larger venue. But on this particular morning, it held something far more significant within its plain walls. Sam sat rigidly in the front row of uncomfortable wooden benches. Emma pressed close beside him on his left, her small hand gripping his fingers so tightly he could feel her rapid pulse beating against his palm. Ava stood near the front of the room beside the prosecutor's table, conferring in low, urgent tones with a federal prosecutor Sam had never seen before, a tall, imposing woman with steel-gray hair cut short and sharp, assessing eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Ava had called Sam late the previous night, her voice tight with barely controlled urgency that cut through the darkness. "There is going to be an emergency hearing tomorrow morning at the federal courthouse, 9 o'clock sharp. You absolutely need to be there with Emma, both of you together." Sam had wanted desperately to refuse, to demand more explanation before agreeing to bring his daughter into an unknown legal proceeding. But something deep and instinctive in Ava's voice made him decide to trust her just enough to show up at the courthouse that morning with Emma by his side. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud creak, and two uniformed federal marshals escorted a man slowly into the hushed room. He was somewhere in his mid-50s, with thinning gray hair combed back from a high forehead and a face that looked like it had witnessed far too many dark secrets over the course of many years. He wore silver handcuffs on his wrists and an expensive charcoal suit that had obviously once been immaculately tailored, but was now wrinkled and stained from days spent in federal custody awaiting this moment. Sam studied the man's weathered face carefully as he shuffled past toward the defense table, but did not recognize him at all. But Emma clearly did. She pressed herself closer against her father's side, her small body beginning to tremble visibly, her breath quickening with unmistakable fear. Her grip on his hand tightened until it was almost painful. "That's him, Daddy," she whispered urgently. "That's the man I saw watching me at school and at the park last month. He was always there somewhere nearby, watching me. He scared me so much." The man in handcuffs was guided to a seat at the defense table, and as he settled into the chair, he looked up slowly and deliberately, his cold, pale eyes finding Emma sitting in the front row of the gallery. A slow, deeply unsettling smile spread across his thin, bloodless lips, a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. So the little girl actually survived after all these years. How very interesting. Sam was on his feet and moving toward the man before his conscious mind even fully registered what his body was doing. Two federal marshals stepped quickly between them, their hands firm and unyielding on Sam's chest, physically holding him back from reaching the smirking prisoner. Ava's clear, commanding voice cut sharply through the sudden chaos filling the small courtroom. "That is enough. Everyone needs to sit down right now." She turned to face Sam directly, her expression calm and controlled, but her dark eyes burning with something fierce and determined he had never seen in her before. It was the look of someone who had been waiting years for this exact moment. "Now you finally understand," she said quietly. Her words meant only for him to hear. "Why I could never bring myself to leave you and Emma alone. That man sitting there is the reason your wife is dead." The man's full legal name was Victor Hale, and he had spent the past 15 years working as a senior private investigator and security consultant for Meridian Industries, a massive multinational corporation with extensive interests in commercial insurance underwriting, real estate development, and more than a dozen other business sectors that operated carefully just within the legal boundaries of the law. Ava explained everything methodically in a small conference room adjacent to the main courtroom, while Emma slept peacefully on a worn leather couch against the far wall, completely exhausted from the intense emotional strain of the morning's events. "Your wife Sarah worked for nearly 4 years in the forensic accounting division at Meridian's regional headquarters in downtown Boston," Ava began, her voice steady and professional. "About 6 years ago, during a routine audit of internal financial records, She accidentally discovered that the company had been systematically falsifying safety inspection reports on several of their large commercial properties across 3 states. Inspection reports that were supposed to ensure buildings were safe for workers and tenants. Reports that, because they were fraudulent, had directly led to at least 3 completely preventable deaths over the previous decade. Sam sat motionless, staring at the polished surface of the conference table, his jaw clenched tight. Sarah collected extensive evidence documenting everything she found. Ava continued. Financial records, internal emails, falsified inspection certificates. She was preparing to go public with all of it, to bring the company down and seek justice for the people who had died. And somehow, Meridian's security division found out what she was planning before she could act. Sam's voice came out rough and strained. And they killed her for it. The fire wasn't an accident. Ava nodded slowly. The fire was deliberately set to destroy all the evidence Sarah had collected and to silence her permanently. Victor Hale planned and supervised the entire operation. When I later discovered the inconsistencies in the case file, Meridian's corporate lawyers pressured my firm to shut me down completely. They assumed I would let it go. She paused. I never did. And Emma? Why has she been a target all this time? Sarah hid a backup copy of all the evidence before she died. We believe she left a clue with Emma. Something only her daughter would recognize when old enough. That's why Meridian has watched Emma for years, and that's why I was assigned to protect her. Sam looked at his sleeping daughter. She's carried this her whole life without knowing. Ava reached across the table. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid you'd do something that would put you both in danger. Her voice cracked. I owe you the truth. I owe Emma the truth. And I owe you both my protection. For as long as you'll let me. The federal trial lasted 4 exhausting months of testimony, evidence, and legal maneuvering. Victor Hale was convicted by a unanimous jury on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, arson resulting in death, and obstruction of justice. 3 senior executives at Meridian Industries were separately indicted on related charges, and the corporation itself faced hundreds of millions of dollars in civil penalties and criminal fines. The crucial evidence that Sarah Whitaker had so carefully hidden was finally recovered, found exactly where she had placed it 6 years earlier. It had been stored in a small safety deposit box at a bank in Boston that Sarah had quietly opened in Emma's name 1 week before she was killed. The key to that box had been sewn with tiny careful stitches into the lining of the worn, stuffed rabbit that Emma had carried every single day since she was 3 years old. Ava had suspected it for months, but couldn't confirm until Emma showed her a small tear in the rabbit's seam and asked if she could fix it. Inside was a brass key and a note in Sarah's handwriting. For my brave girl, when you're ready, you'll know what to do. Sam stood on the broad granite steps of the federal courthouse on the final day. Spring sun warm on his face. Emma held his right hand tightly, her rabbit tucked under her arm with fresh stitches. Ava stood beside them, her face lighter than he had ever seen. What happens now? Sam asked quietly. The case is closed. My assignment is complete. She hesitated. But I've been offered a position at a firm here in Ridgewood. Emma tugged Ava's sleeve. Please, don't go away now. Ava knelt to her level. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Not unless you want me to. Emma shook her head. I don't. Sam watched them, something shifting in his chest. For 3 years since Sarah's death, he had carried grief alone. But watching Emma smile at the woman who had protected them from shadows, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself in a long time. Hope. Ava rose and met his eyes. Everything I did because I believed in Sarah, and because I believed in you. Sam nodded. I know. They walked down the steps together, 3 people bound by tragedy and truth, stepping into a future, finally their own. Emma ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Sam and Ava walked in comfortable silence. Thank you, Sam said quietly, for never giving up. Ava smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "Thank you for letting me stay." Ahead, Emma turned and waved. And for the first time in 3 years, Sam believed the worst was behind them. That somewhere, Sarah was watching. And that she was proud.